We have no trust, we have no record, there doesn't appear to be any structural support, they've failed completion of tasks. Wow. Those aren't just everyday complaints. Those are the stark, absolutely unyielding words of Petaluma's mayor, Kevin McDonald. When a municipality's leader comes out and publicly speaks about a contracted service provider with that level of complete, undeniable frustration, you know we're looking at a massive structural collapse.
Welcome to this investigative explainer. Today we're doing a deep dive, a hard news panel-style look into a crisis that's literally sweeping across California's municipalities. We're examining how systems that were originally designed to protect public health, safety, and animal welfare are just buckling under misguided policies and decentralization. It's like a giant puzzle of municipal contracts, state funding, and public safety risks. To help us untangle all this, I'm joined on the panel by our animal welfare legal expert and our deep dive consultant, Paul Miller. Let's get into it.
Okay, the epicenter of our investigation today is North Bay Animal Services, or NBAS for short. They're a nonprofit organization based out of Petaluma. Now, starting back in 2018, this group began scooping up municipal contracts left and right across places like Petaluma, Windsor, Cloverdale, Sebastopol, and even stepping outside the county into Clear Lake and Calistoga. Now, you might be wondering, how does a relatively new nonprofit secure that much territory so fast? Well, it's pretty simple. They were the lowest bidder. They promised these cities the whole shebang, a full range of animal control and sheltering services at a mere fraction of the cost of other providers. But, as we're seeing, what actually happens when you hand over public safety and animal welfare to the lowest bidder? The difference between their slit promises and the reality on the ground is, honestly, it's jaw-dropping. We started with promises of cost-effective contracts and incredibly high standards of care, but ultimately, a really grim reality was exposed. Up in Clear Lake, city officials and local advocates reported finding as many as 114 dogs living in completely inhumane conditions. We're talking exposed to the elements, surrounded by urine and feces for months, fed expired food with basically no set schedules. The volunteers and grand juries who uncovered this were absolutely horrified.
Now, to be completely fair and impartial here, we have to look at both sides of the coin. NBAS Director Mark Scott has pushed back really firmly against these abandonment claims. He stated on the record, "Never did we abandon animals." He explains that, yeah, while they did start ramping down staff in the final month of that Clear Lake operation, there were still full-time staffers physically present at the shelter. And he makes a valid point that this isn't just an isolated NBAS issue.
And he's totally right about the statewide strain. Let's bring in our deep dive consultant, Paul Miller, to look at the bigger picture here. Paul, what exactly is driving this at the state level? Thanks. Well, it really all comes down to one massive number, $50 million. Back in 2021, California poured $50 million into a sweeping state initiative that was meant to save all treatable, adoptable animals. But according to recent investigations, instead of actually solving the crisis, this money kind of cemented a top-down framework focused heavily on what they call capacity for care and managed intake. Basically, these policies often restricted shelter admissions just to keep the numbers looking low on paper, without necessarily solving the root problems of animals out on the streets.
And the fallout of that $50 million experiment, it's honestly shocking, especially when you look at the total lack of oversight. An independent audit found that only 38.5% of California government animal agencies submitted any of their intake and outcome data to the national database in 2023. Over 60% of the data is just missing. It's gone. When shelters adopt these restrictive intake policies as a prerequisite for getting state funding, but then don't even report their outcomes, accountability literally disappears into the shadows.
And if you need proof that this is a systemic failure, we just have to look at Los Angeles. Despite that massive $50 million statewide investment, Los Angeles Animal Services reported a 72% increase in dog euthanasia in 2024. That's a huge red flag. Across the entire state, euthanasia is rising. San Diego shelters? They've seen euthanasia more than double since 2023. The whole system is under incredible stress right now, and these top-down policies seem to be failing the exact animals they were funded to protect.
Thanks for that context, Paul. So how did this statewide pressure cooker explode at the local level with NBS? Let's bring in our animal welfare legal expert to unpack this document, the 2024-2025 Sonoma County Civil Grand Jury Report. This 22-page report formally blew the lid off the entire NBS operation. It investigated citizen complaints and systematically documented how NBS was operating far, far outside of state laws and their contractual requirements.
Right. So when I reviewed these grand jury findings, the legal violations were just glaring. I mean, NBS wasn't just providing bad customer service. They were actively violating the law. They totally failed to perform sterilization surgeries before sending animals to foster homes. They placed animals in facilities with incredibly poor ventilation and overpowering odors. But honestly, the most alarming thing for local governments, they consistently failed to submit bite reports to the county health officer, and they completely skipped offering the legally mandated rabies vaccination clinics.
And that last point about the rabies clinics, that is a massive legal liability. Because under state law, all of California is a declared rabies area. This means absolutely every county and city has to implement a strict rabies control plan, ensuring low-cost vaccinations and strict quarantines for dangerous animals. When a contractor provider like NBS just ignores bite reports and skips those clinics, it isn't just sloppy administrative work. It is a direct, actionable threat to public health. And it places the contracting cities at severe legal and financial risk.
So, question for the panel, how did the cities even let this happen?
Well, the grand jury placed the blame squarely on decentralization. See, when animal services are fractured across all these different lowest bidder nonprofits instead of a centralized county agency, you end up with a highly confusing patchwork. Centralization gives you unified public safety protocols and strict oversight. Decentralization, which is the model these cities chose just to save a few bucks, resulted in absolutely zero board oversight, totally uncoordinated emergency responses, and a massive failure by the cities themselves to actually monitor the contracts they were signing.
Yeah, and if we look at the actual financial reality of this lowest bidder mentality, the numbers are just eye-opening. The city of Sebastopol was spending a measly $2.42 per capita on animal services through NBS. Now compare that to neighboring Napa County, which actually runs its own public shelter and spends anywhere between $14 and $21 per capita. You simply cannot provide legally mandated veterinary care, proper staffing, and public safety enforcement for $2.42 a person. As one advocate pointed out in the report, you get exactly what you pay for.
Paul, this underfunded model obviously wrecks daily care, but what about during emergencies?
That is another completely catastrophic risk. In a state that is as prone to devastating wildfires as California, emergency preparedness is totally non-negotiable. And yet, the grand jury found that NBS lacked any written emergency response plan or mutual aid agreements, none. Conversely, if you look at centralized agencies like Sonoma County Animal Services, they have fully equipped emergency trailers and specialized, highly trained rescue teams ready to deploy at a moment's notice. The contrast in public safety readiness is literally night and day.
Okay, so what's the solution for all these municipalities currently caught in the fallout? Well, we are seeing a massive, rapid pivot away from the decentralized lowest bidder model and a move back toward established, centralized partnerships. Cities are now stepping up to partner with veteran organizations like the Humane Society of Sonoma County, working alongside county services. These established groups don't just offer vastly better daily care, they provide integrated disaster response. That includes things like cohabitation shelters, where evacuated residents can safely stay with their pets during natural disasters, which drastically reduces trauma and resource strain.
In this exodus, it has been incredibly swift and totally unforgiving, as cities literally scrambled to protect their taxpayers and their public health. Back in August 2025, Clear Lake terminated its contract. By March 3, 2026, Petaluma, which was NBS's own headquarters, unanimously voted to cut ties. And by the end of March 2026, Sebastopol and Windsor followed suit. They chose to absorb the higher costs of interim contracts with the Humane Society just to stop the bleeding and restore legal compliance to their animal control services. Which brings us to a final, pretty provocative question for you, the viewer. We've just walked through the disastrous legal, ethical, and public safety consequences that happen when municipalities chase the absolute cheapest contract without maintaining any strict oversight. So we really have to ask, is your local government sacrificing public safety and animal welfare to the lowest bidder? Honestly, it's a question every single taxpayer should be asking their city council right now. Thank you to our experts Paul and our legal team for joining the panel today, and thank you for watching this explainer. Dig into those local budgets, demand real transparency, and we'll see you next time.